I'm Stuart Childs and you're welcome to The Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. With significant changes coming in the nitrates regulations, one option that dairy farmers can consider to reduce their overall stocking rate while allowing them to maintain existing cow numbers is contract rearing. And while it isn't a new idea, it is an option that more people may be considering from 2023, not only from a nitrates perspective but also from a workload point of view. I spoke to Michael Bourke, Drystock Advisor in the Teagasc Moorepark office, and I started by asking Michael, why does he promote contract rearing to his clients?
There are many reasons why I'd recommend contract rearing to dry stock clients. I suppose the first one is it's profitable. While beef prices are good at the moment, a dry stock farmer may get in one hand, will have to give out in the other hand the following day to buy in stock. So it is a very profitable system. There's a steady income every month. Its payments are generally done through direct debit on a monthly basis. I suppose dry stock farmers can remain in control of their farm. There's a lot of uncertainty around the place there for the last few years in terms of the future of the single farm payment and what would happen with entitlements, etc. So this allows the dry stock farmer to remain in complete control of the farm, and also reduce the risks from the marketplace. So it takes the volatility of beef price out of the equation. And also, I suppose, if the costings are done in this correctly, basically what a beef farmer should be getting in this should compensate for leasing out the farm. So that's basically where the Teagasc calculator is done, which we'll discuss again later on.
Okay, so what you're saying there is there's a nice bit in it more over and above kind of the value of the payment itself for the contract rearing from the point of view of the dry stock farmer, that they get to retain the land, they get to retain control of their farm as well. Obviously, as you said, is important from the point of view of single farm payments. They're also still eligible for schemes, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. Every farmer that goes contract rearing is entitled to draw down the new acres programme. As I said, they're entitled to draw down their single farm payment. And the Teagasc calculator, I suppose, is the device to do that. It's basically there's labour charge put into the calculator, and then the beef farmer then can input the value of their own land. So whether it be €200 an acre, €300 an acre, €400 an acre, that's factored into the calculator. So again, they're getting rewarded for their work on the farm. So yeah, it's a very, very viable option for dry stock farms.
Okay, and then we'll say from your perspective, talking to your clients, Michael, or to, we'll say, dry stock farmers in general, do you find that they're receptive to the idea of going contract rearing, or is there a little bit of resistance towards it maybe?
Yeah, it's a very slow burner. I suppose I'm involved in contract rearing well over 15 years. Generally after an event, we had one there in Cornmarch maybe 3 to 4 years ago. There was a good bit of interest after that. We had one there on the farm of Lyle Butterman from I there only a few weeks ago, and again you get a few phone calls after that. But it is a very, very slow burner. But every year there are a few new entrants into the whole contract rearing. There should possibly be more. But again, I suppose it's all about the dry stock farmer and being open-minded into a contract rearing system. You are working with somebody else, and sometimes farmers may find that difficult.
Picking up on what you said there, so and knowing that you have a good track record in terms of encouraging your clients that you've been dealing with into different enterprises down through the years anyway, be it dairy or maybe even branching out into kind of more niche areas as well. What are the attributes that you look for when you're assessing a client in relation to their potential to be a contract rearer, as the dry stock side of the house will say?
Yeah, and I suppose it's important to state that as well, like that contract rearing is merely an option for farmers, or for dry stock farms. It's one of many options, but a few things that I would look for in a farmer is that they must be open-minded and they must be willing to work with somebody else. That's the most important part. And they must also be excellent grassland managers, because at the end of the day, if a dry stock farmer is not good at managing grass, they're not going to make money out of contract rearing. They won't be able to carry the stocking rate required. So generally speaking, there are the few things I would look for: grassland manager, and be very, very open-minded to work with somebody else. And
on the grassland management side, Mike, is it fair to say that we'll say that they can get a little better at grass management in the role of a contract rearer as well, or is that unfair to say?
No, that's 100% true. Yeah, like at the end of the day, dairy farmers are very, very good at growing grass, and I have found over the years that grassland farmers, the dry stock farmers, tend to improve at their grassland management the longer they're in contract rearing. They have access to a dairy farmer who's top class at growing grass, and two heads are better than one, and they're able to bounce ideas off each other. But generally speaking, the fixed costs in a contract rearing system remain static. Whether you have 20 calves, 50 calves or 100 calves, you're still going to have a tractor in the farmyard. And it's all about getting feet on the ground. And as the years go on, the dry stock farmer tends to see that, and their management becomes better and better, because that's where the profit is. It's in the number of calves you can carry on the same amount of ground.
Okay, so, and just from your own perspective then, is it important in your mind that you'd only engage people that you feel are suitable? So like that you're making an assessment of a person and saying, yeah, this person has the potential to be a contract rearer, or do you throw it out as an option to everybody?
Well, it's out there as an option for everybody, but I suppose I know my own clients. I know the people that would be suitable for contract rearing. I know the farmers that would be willing to work with somebody else. And again, I know the farmers that are very, very good at growing grass. But if I get a name from a colleague that maybe I wouldn't have met before, I'll always try and get out to visit that farm and assess the farmer for myself before I'd recommend that farmer's name to somebody else, because at the end of the day, it has to work both ways. So you can't just give a name to a farmer without knowing who you're dealing with. I suppose, as I always say, it's always nice to know who the childminder is before you send your children there. So it is important that you get to visit the farm, know the farm, and get a feel for the farmer yourself before you'd recommend him to anybody else.
Very good. And just in terms of then, how does the process go? So when you've assessed the childminder now, how are you finding the child? We'll say, when you establish that meeting with with your own client or with that new person that you've engaged with, where does it go from there? Are you finished with the process then, or what's your role in getting it onto the next step?
Yeah, there's massive variation out there. Sometimes it's just a matter of exchanging phone numbers from one farmer to the other farmer, and you're giving your recommendation. Sometimes it involves going back out to visit the farm, maybe more than one occasion, and going through the written agreement that Teagasc have established, and going through that thoroughly with the dry stock farmer, just to show them exactly what's in it and the detail that's involved in it. So yeah, there's massive variation from my perspective. It can just be, as I said, giving a phone number to a farmer or doing a farm visit and going through the contract rearing agreement as well.
So in a way, you're kind of almost setting up a blind date kind of scenario in the initial stages, and then depending on the requirements, you may be involved further after that, like.
Exactly, yeah. And it's, as I said, it's just getting back to knowing the two people you're dealing with, because nobody wants hassle at the end of the day. So it's important that you are recommending somebody that you know something about. Okay.
So just in terms of, we've established the relationship in terms of that a person's going to go into an agreement, but from your experience, and as you mentioned, you've been involved in contract rearing nearly 15 years now, what is the foundation of the best agreements that you've seen operating? Is it all about the money, or what's the story with it?
Strangely enough, it's not about the money. It's all about the people involved. There has to be trust between both parties. I generally recommend the beef farmer to go visit the dairy farmer, as well as the dairy farmer obviously visiting the beef farmer. It's important that both people get to know each other before they go into this. It's a relationship. They have to trust each other. And it has to work for both parties. At the end of the day, the beef farmer is rearing the future of the dairy farmer's herd. So it has to work both ways. And obviously money is important as well, but for me it's the trust between both farmers is what's important here.
And I suppose it's very important from the dry stock farmer's point of view, Michael, that they're getting just reward for their time, but that's probably key to the actual agreement, is that it's set up at the start, is it?
Exactly, yeah. As I said, there is a written agreement there. We strongly recommend everybody to look through the written agreement, go through it together and sign off on it. There are plenty of agreements out there. We'll say there's plenty of verbal agreements out there, and everything is fine until something goes wrong, and then it's back to the wall job, because unless it's written down who's going to pay for what, it just creates trouble later on. So it's important that the contract agreement is gone through thoroughly and signed off by both parties, and preferably with a mediator as well, or some form of facilitator to get them involved as well.
Okay, and just I suppose just from the point of view of what you said there earlier about matching the clients, you're trying to ensure that the agreements will be a success, but what in your experience are the main reasons that the agreements fail?
I suppose a lot of the agreements just fail to take off first day, and that's probably the preferable stage for an agreement to fail, because it just gets very, very messy if the agreements break down later on. So they generally fail before they ever take off the ground, to be honest. So it could just basically mean that a dairy farmer goes to visit the dairy or the beef farmer and just not happy with the grassland management, or just gets a bad vibe, or they just don't seem to get on for one reason or another, and then they can't. Another obvious thing is they just can't agree on a price. So most agreements that I've been involved with just fail to take off the ground. The ones that fail just fail to take off initially. But as I said, if they take off and you work together for the early stages, they just tend to work from there on. Very few fail after that.
Okay, so if it's meeting minds, basically, they'll tend to go, yeah.
Yep.
So I suppose another issue, what's your thinking in relation to the role of weights in terms of keeping everybody happy on both sides of the agreement, that we'll say that the dry stock farmer is delivering on his promises, we'll say, and equally so, it's important to point out the dairy farmer is expected to deliver a calf to the contractor in the first place that's at the right target weight for that stage that they're arriving on the farm.
Yeah, and again, that's important. I was only talking to a farmer even earlier on this morning about this, and it's important that the calves are weighed on the dairy farm before they ever come to the beef farmer's farm. And in terms of weights, there's two agreements there. There's a flat rate agreement and there's a weight bonus agreement. I'm not a particular fan of the weight bonus agreement. I think it's like signing a prenup. There's a lack of trust there from the get-go. At the end of the day, if you matched up with a good beef farmer's job is to put weight on cattle. That's what they have traditionally done, is put weight on cattle. I suppose the dairy farmer's job is to get milk out of a cow, and that's the simplest way I look at it. So if you can get matched up with a good dry stock farmer, no better person to put weight on cattle. And at the end of the day, it's all about weight, getting the animal to reach puberty at an earlier age, and that's all weight related rather than age related, as we know. So yep, that's basically the situation there.
Okay, and just I suppose going back to the finances, you said it's not all about the money, but just what are your thoughts on the increase in costs on all farming systems in 2022? I suppose it's quite clear, but how does it impact on contract rearers, and like is there a risk because of the increase in costs that are there, and maybe people being tied into an agreement as such that they a bit like some of the fixed milk price contracts that are there, that they could break down, the communications could break down, things could get a little bit messy over the rising costs. What's your experience with people?
Yeah, costs are significant, but a ton of fertiliser costs the same in a dairy farm as it does in a beef farm. So like both parties know that the increase in costs are there. And again, it gets back to the trust and the level of communication, as you just said, Stuart. It gets back to the communication. It's important that you talk to the dairy farmer. I deal with beef farmers, obviously, so I would be encouraging them to talk to the dairy farmer in time. At the end of the day, the beef farmer still has to maintain a margin out of this, because there's an increase in fertiliser or ration costs. The beef farmer can't be at a loss. But again, you must communicate, get back to the dairy farmer and outline this. There's nobody going to come to you with a check in the hand and say, here you go, you have to fight your corner, and you just have to reason with the dairy farmer. And in fairness, the vast majority of contract rearing agreements that I'm involved with, there's generally no issue. There's generally no issue with money, because, as I said, the dairy farmer knows the price of fertiliser as well as the beef farmer does. So again, the key word here is communication, and communication in time.
Yeah, so I suppose that open door policy, really, as you said, about farmers visiting one another's farms, even just dropping up to showing an interest, I suppose, even in the contract rearer from the dairy farmer's point of view, will say, okay, you might take a look at the stock, obviously, while you're there as well, but you're not there to look over things because you don't trust them. You're actually there because of the relationship, and that kind of, as you said, open door policy, maybe from a grassland management point of view, is good for both, but also leads to better communication, that there's an actual friendship almost developed around the business agreement is probably key to it as well, is it?
Exactly, yeah. And again, there's massive variation in this. I'm involved with some agreements where the dairy farmer will visit the beef farmer maybe on a weekly basis or fortnightly basis just to check on the stock. And I have other cases where the dairy farmer may only visit once a year, and that's in relation to the transport of animals. So the degree of visits or communication is massive on farms, but it's about being able to pick up the phone as well as just being able to visit a farmer. None of us wants another farmer living inside in your yard either, just keeping an eye over your shoulder. There has to be that trust element there as well. But again, you have to be able to communicate with each other, and that gets back to the initial bonding, I suppose, if you want to put it that way. And the initial agreements that they've set up within themselves, and it's about the trust aspect of it, and keeping the doors open, as you said, Stuart. It's in a situation like that because there's no 2 years the same as we have seen this year and last year. Every year is different, so there must be that level of flexibility within the agreement as well. That if costs do go up, that the margin is maintained, and that's critical. And it has to work on both sides as well. Like we all know that milk prices going very, very well this year. So it's important that the dry stock farmer doesn't, I suppose, get too greedy, for want of a better word, and is happy with their level of margin. Because if milk price drops next year, that has to be kept in mind as well. So
it's a two-way street.
It's a two-way street, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose just as I said in the opening piece there, Michael, the changes to the regulations and stuff, would you see that being a big opportunity for your client base, we'll say, or dry stock farmers in general, or what's your thinking on it?
Yeah, I suppose, look, there is an opportunity there for some dry stock farmers to look at going contract rearing. We're all aware of the nitrates regulations and the new banding system that's there for the dairy cow. And there's definitely plenty of information out there on contract rearing. It is a slow burner. Maybe from next year onwards, it will gain more traction. But it's absolutely a good option for a lot of dry stock farmers. It's a very profitable system. It's a low risk system for the dry stock farmer. It enables them to keep control of their farm. It's a far better option in my view, and I've said this on numerous occasions before. It's a far better option than leasing out the farm. Okay, granted, the leasing out of the farm is tax free. But if somebody has a young son or daughter at home, they may be interested in going farming at some stage down the road. If you're contract rearing, at least they have some involvement in the farm as opposed to leasing out the farm for a 7 to 10 year period. Then they're gone from home and they're not going to come back in their 20s to take up farming at that stage. So look, there's numerous benefits to going contract rearing. And it is merely an option. I have to keep saying that because it is an option. We're not trying to railroad anybody into contract rearing, but it is an option that's definitely well worth looking at.
And Michael, I suppose you said there you're not trying to railroad people into contract rearing, but Lyle is a good example of it there a couple of weeks ago at the event. He's actually still running his dry stock enterprise side by side with the contract rearing, so it actually can complement the business as much as it's not necessarily a full all-in, all-out scenario.
Yeah, it can complement the business, and I suppose that brings its own element of risk as well. If you've maybe got your own stock and a dairy farmer's stock inside into one yard, Lyle is in a fortunate position where he's got several blocks of ground, so from a TB perspective that has to be kept in mind as well. But it can run side by side with another business. For argument's sake, if you're the sheep enterprise or if you're the tillage enterprise on the farm, ideally there should be only heifers there inside in the block of ground from one dairy farm. But as I said, in Lyle's situation, he has several blocks of ground, so it works perfectly well for him. But it definitely can work well with another enterprise on the farm, yep.
Yeah, and I suppose just to expand on it a little bit, there's varying degrees of arrangements on farms as well, so it's not always full from 3 months old, kind of 4 months old, all the way through to just prior to calving. There's a good few bits of variations in what people are doing too.
Absolutely, yeah. Contract rearing can mean moving an animal at any age of its life over and back. The standard arrangement that you'd have is the weaned calf going onto the dry stock farm and coming back maybe at 20-21 months of age. But with it, in between that, there's many variations of it. We have some farmers who are taking in the year-old heifer just for the summer grazing. We have weanlings going in just for the summer grazing. In one case there's animals being transferred in just for the winter period because the dairy farmer is short of housing. So there's many variations to contract rearing. And when somebody generally rings up and asks me how much should I be getting for a contract rearing agreement, there's no one set price. It all depends on what the arrangement is and how long the animal is going to spend on the dry stock farm. It depends on how much of the inputs the dry stock farmer and the dairy farmer are going to purchase. So there's many different arrangements there. But what I would advise farmers who are looking at going contract rearing is to contact their advisor. We have, as I said, a very, very good calculator. And I suppose that's the one big change I have seen in contract rearing over my 15 or so years involved in contract rearing. In years gone by, there was many ad hoc kind of arrangements there. A lot of figures done in the back of a fag box. But now we have a Teagasc calculator there. It works for both parties. It works for both the dairy farmer and for the beef farmer. And I would strongly consider anybody looking at contract rearing to contact their advisor to go through the costs and to see if they're happy with what the level of margin is out of contract rearing.
I suppose it's important to point out as well, Michael, that you're actually paying for a labour scenario there as well. Like you mentioned earlier about that you're effectively leasing the land from the dry stock farmer in one sense, but that so when people are comparing the costs of, if they can, because there's very few people that I know can actually tell you how much it costs them to rear a heifer themselves, but if they're in a position to compare them one with the other, they have to factor in that they need to put a price on their own labour in the role as well. Otherwise, it's going to make it look like that this business is more expensive to go down the route of contract rearing, really, is it? Yeah,
look, and as I said, in the calculator itself, while the labour charge isn't massive, it has been worked out before that there's 13 hours involved in rearing a calf to a heifer stage, and the cost per that is €15 an hour. So again, the labour charge isn't massive in the system. But again, you have to take cognizance of the fact that there is work involved in rearing these animals, so the farmer has to be rewarded for their labour charge, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and finally, Michael, I'll just ask you, I suppose, as a dry stock advisor then, what advice would you give to dairy farmers that are considering going contract rearing? as a solution to either their nitrates or workload or both?
Yeah, I strongly encourage dairy farmers to look at contract rearing. It's definitely a very good option for them. As I said, there's jam in this for both parties. The labour is a big issue on dairy farms at the moment. Land is a massive issue, as we outlined already. The whole banding system and the nitrates regulations may change coming down the road as well. What I would strongly recommend is to contact our advisor again. Do the costs and that Teagasc calculator is what it does cost to rear a heifer and their own farm, because some may be surprised by the costs that are involved in rearing a heifer. And I think once they have the costs done on rearing these heifers, that they may strongly consider looking at contract rearing after that.
Okay, thank you, Michael. That was a very good piece, and thanks for talking to us today.
Okay, thank you, Stuart.
That's all for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Michael Bourke for joining us on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, and for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join me next time for Your Dairy Edge.